Hello, welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. It's Funmi, Principal Attorney at the firm. So today's review, we're going to be looking at Samsung's cookie notice. I'm doing a review on my channel of different cookie notices and process flows for organizations in the US. Take a look at the Samsung cookie policy. Let's take a look at this banner first. So Samsung has some information here, representation about their usage of certain cookies. We're going to configure our settings. So this is considered a preference center where it says manage your cookies. It's a preference center where we can manage the types of cookies and experience that we have as it pertains to interacting with Samsung and their services. Now, a organization should provide a scope when they provide first the banner. So there should be a process. The first process you should receive is you should receive that cookie banner that we saw. The opportunity to know that cookies are going to be utilized by an organization, and then the option to either accept, reject, and then manage our settings. That's the first thing you should see when you land on a page. Now, geography matters. I'm going to put nuance there. If the organization is operating globally, then yes, that's something you should see, particularly if they process the personal data of EU residents. If a company is processing the personal data of residents in other geographies, the cookie process flow is going to be very different. Now, I'm going to manage my settings here. I always opt out of them. This information is really crucial because this should be reflected on the cookie policy we're about to go back to. So essential cookies apparently are used by Samsung, analytical and performance cookies, functionality and profile, and advertising. And you as a consumer, this is really useful. Many consumers probably wouldn't do this, but you can actually view the applicable cookies and you can see which third parties are associated with advertising and targeting based on the relationship with Samsung, okay? And currently we're on a no, meaning that analytics and performance cookies are not being collected on how I access the site and my browsing habits. If I choose as a consumer to select yes, then this would change. I'm going to say no, and then we're just going to get into the cookie policy that they have. All right, so this was last updated 2nd of May 23, so it's been 2 years. The first question I would have is, does the cookie policy reflect how Samsung is doing business in 2025? If it's not, this will need some updates. And then also we have some contact information if we have any questions about how cookies are being utilized. And a consumer at this point could probably send a message to the European Data Protection Officer for Samsung and say, hey, your cookie policy was last updated on the 2nd of May 2023. Is your policy indicative of how your company is doing or utilizing cookies in 2025? And Samsung would then have to provide some information on how cookies are being utilized and if this is still an accurate representation, because that's what companies are doing. When they provide you with these policies, they're saying this is how we use cookies. If that's changed over the course of 2 years, then some of these representations are going to need updating. And that's one thing that companies should be cognizant of. When you build your privacy program, it's not something that you do and then that's the end. Your privacy program is ever evolving because your company is ever evolving. How your company uses personal data likely changes on at least a monthly basis because you're bringing in new vendors, you're targeting new customers. Anytime you as a business conduct an operation or set of operations on personal data, you're processing personal information. And anytime you process personal information, you need to be transparent to your consumers how you process that personal information. So there's a lot of different factors that go into a company creating a cookie policy and placing it on their website. Now, it may be that this cookie policy is still the same as what Samsung is doing today, but it may also have changed. And I'll tell you, something that's been seen in the industry generally is there are very new tracking technologies that companies are utilizing in order to serve advertisements to consumers. And one of the reasons, let's say, for example, I was looking to buy a computer or display. There are certain cookies that companies like Samsung, now I don't know this for a fact because we haven't checked their policy yet, but anytime you make a click, a lot of these companies are tracking every single click that you make on their website because they want to further advertise to you on other platforms. Now, some consumers are like, oh, why exactly is it that I'm able to see this memory and storage that I looked at on Samsung's website, even though I'm on Amazon right now? The reason is because of the relationship Samsung probably has with Amazon. And secondly, the cookies that you accepted when you interacted with the site. Let's go down to the actual cookies. So essential, performance, functional, and advertising. When we were looking at that preference center before, we saw each of these demonstrated there. The representations that you make on the cookie policy need to align with the preference center that consumers see. That's why the process flow is so important. And that's why we went through each stage when we were reviewing this. Make sure that if you are telling consumers we use the following types of cookies on our website, when you have the preference center where consumers can manage their cookies, they're able to manage all of the cookies that you've listed here. Now, some cookies are essential. We can see that here. Essential cookies enable a consumer to receive the services they request via the website. Without these cookies, services that you have asked for cannot be provided. These cookies are automatically enabled and cannot be turned off. This is the only cookie that Samsung should have where consumers cannot manage their preferences. But for the rest of them that are not mandatory for the website to function, consumers should have the opportunity to opt out or manage how these cookies are utilized. Other local storage. We, along with certain third parties, may use other kinds of local storage technology such as local shared objects and HTML5 local storage in connection with our services. These technologies are similar to the cookies discussed above in that they are stored on your device and can be used to store certain information about your activities. Like I'd mentioned above, every time you click on a certain product that Samsung is offering, there's certain information that's being collected on you, and that's why it's so important to manage your preferences as a consumer. Same with pixels. I want to talk a little bit about why it's so important for Samsung to list pixels and other local storage here. Personal data is not a concept that is the same amongst geographies. The definition of personal information varies depending on where a company offers its products and services. That's why interpretation of the privacy laws is very important for consumers. You're not absolved of your obligations just because you don't understand the laws that apply to your company. Now, I've made mention of other local storage in pixels because the definition of personal data in some geographies is any information or data that directly or indirectly identifies an individual. Because the pixels can be associated with you as you interact with the website, it constitutes personal data in some geographies. And as such, the obligations for Samsung is to be transparent about their practices as it pertains to your personal data, of which a pixel could constitute in some geographies. Now, I know that sounded very legalese, but there's no other way for me to be able to explain to my audience what I'm talking about. Long and short of it is, a pixel constitutes personal data. In some geographies, personal data is anything that could indirectly identify you, and Samsung has obligations to be transparent about how it uses personal data. That's the long and short of it. The cookie policy that we're looking at here is not the only document that privacy lawyers generally will look at. We'll also look at the process documents for the IT and security teams that actually ensure that cookies are delivered on the site. So there's a lot more that goes into the review of cookie obligations for an organization. If your company is looking for a data protection lawyer to evaluate your cookie compliance with the data protection laws, take a look at my description below and I'll see you in another review.